Welcome back, sleepyheads. You always seem to arrive right on time. Before Silas takes his first step, a word from the voice behind the clock. You know, the one who sets these nights in motion and knows exactly when to slow them down. See, I chose Philadelphia on this evening because this is where history pauses, gathers its breath, and considers the consequences. There's no parades yet. There's no fireworks. Just shuttered windows, careful whispers, and a dangerous idea passing hand to hand by candlelight. Independence hasn't been declared. It's still a thought, still fragile, still very much punishable. That makes it the perfect place for a quiet walk. The world isn't celebrating yet. It's leaning in, listening to itself think. If these hushed moments before the storm are your kind of calm, stay with me. Join the sleepy circle along the way. Let's begin.
Chapter 1. The River's Omen. The Delaware River Dock. Elfreth's Alley. The river greets me first. A long, black thigh bone of water, flexing under a sky the color of pewter. The tide hisses at the pilings as if shushing the city. The pilings decline to be shushed and creak like old men, remembering battles they didn't win. Lanterns swing along the dock. Yellow moons trapped in glass. Their flames bowing and recovering in the wind. The smell is salt and pitch, wet rope and old barrels, and underneath it all the iron tang of weather with opinions. I step from a narrow skiff, and the water claps once against the hull, as if applauding the arrival of one more fool to tonight's performance. The oarsman touches 2 fingers to his cap, his face folded into the working geometry of men whose hours belong to tide tables. Beyond him, the Delaware stretches into fog that could be sea or could be rumor. Thunder grumbles somewhere, offshore, upriver, overhead, uncertain whether it will be weather or artillery when it grows up. A sailor on the next pier smokes a clay pipe with all the ceremony of a sacrament. He doesn't look at me, but he speaks into the dark, and that's close enough. They're out there, he says, smoke flat in the wind. Red sails. Waiting. He taps the bowl lightly against the rail. King won't send bread, so he sends boats. His voice has the salt-dry humor of a man who knows both bread and boats are late. I walk the planks as softly as the boards allow. Each footfall answers with a wet wooden syllable. Farther out on the pier, a rowboat bobs against its tether. Bump, 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 a patient heartbeat. A gull argues with the wind. The wind wins. Troops' voices lift and fall a few docks over. Low, drilled vowels. A sergeant's consonants striking sparks. The cadence resolves into silence again, and I taste the quiet like tin on my tongue. The city that will wake a world is half asleep right now. The lamps along Water Street throw puddles of light with ragged edges. A cart rattles past, its axle complaining. I catch a flash of a barrel stamped molasses and a second stamp that looks suspiciously like gun. The carter meets my eyes for half a blink and then looks away, as if I've asked him to do long division without paper. I step off the dock, and the cobbles take my weight like a secret. Behind me, the river exhales. Ahead, Philadelphia gathers her skirts, pulls them above the mud, and leads me inland. The narrow throat of Elfreth's alley waits. Lanterns haloed in mist, shutters leaned shut like folded arms. The houses lean toward each other, brick cheeks a whisper apart, as if swapping gossip privately over my head. The alley feels stitched together with laundry lines and old promises. I walk in the middle, where the stones are worn smooth by centuries of sensible people who knew better than to hug the walls. Up above, Window panes catch the lamplight and let it go again. A cat slinks along a sill, tail high, with middle-class dignity. Somewhere behind a door, a baby yawns. Small, content tyranny. The night is soft with domestic noises. A poker clinking against hearth iron, a spoon against a bowl. A whisper that is either prayer or a quarrel paused for breath. I let my own breath drift shallow and slow, the better to hear the century turning the latch. Then the alley tightens, and the air gets thinner by a layer. Footsteps, two sets, approach from opposite ends, with the careful rhythm of men who have rehearsed not being overheard. I move into the shadow of a carriage arch, where damp brick cools the back of my coat. The wind slides narrow between houses and brings with it the faintest thread of a tune. God save the king, hummed under the breath, because even loyalty wears slippers at this hour. A silhouette stops beneath a lantern. He raises a hand, and the light gathers on the knuckles, bone white, calloused, courtly in its caution. Another man in a tricorn steps out from the hush. They do not greet. They simply exchange. A folded note crosses the gap like a moth in heat. The first man tucks it into his sleeve without looking. The second tips his head once and disappears down alley, Boots not daring to argue with the stones. On the opposite side, a shutter snaps shut so firmly it startles the lantern flame. I almost laugh. Philadelphia's most common language tonight is the emphatic window closure. Even the rats here choose sides, I whisper, and a rat, offended by typecasting, trots across my path with the air of a neutral party. I let the informant pass my hiding place, his coat smelling faintly of starch and bad decisions. He leaves behind a wake of nervous air. When he's gone, the alley exhales like a held breath finally released. From a kitchen somewhere, bread cools on a sill. Yeast kisses night. Say what you will about empires. Nobody wins a war on an empty stomach. I step back into the center of the lane, and the city resumes its uneasy, dreaming. A woman opens her door just enough to pour out dishwater. It hits the stones like a sigh and races downhill to join the river. The door shuts again, politely, decisively. Above me, a clothesline groans as it surrenders a shirt back into the house. Somewhere close, a man coughs the way men cough when they've owed their lungs to smoke for too long. At the bend of the alley, a lantern flares as a wick takes a second try at existence. Its sudden brightness catches the glaze on a ceramic tile set above a lintel. A painted tulip, blue faded to patience. Dutch prettiness clinging to English brick, clinging to a city about to elbow itself free of both. I reach up and touch the tile with 2 fingers. It's warm from the lamp's breath, warmer still from hands over generations greeting it coming home. Another sound threads the night. Not thunder this time, something trickier. The rhythm of oars, muffled and steady. Then the faint chink of metal on metal. A grapnel? No. My imagination begs to be dramatic. The river plays its lullaby and lets it go. I think of the sailor's voice. They're out there, waiting. The fog feels closer now, the kind that erases distances and excuses mistakes. Philadelphia, I murmur to no one but the cat, and perhaps an angel with insomnia. You look calm for someone about to do something unforgivable to the usual order. The cat blinks at me as if to say, order was never that usual. The alley spills me onto a slightly wider street, where the city's breath is heavier. A cart stands unattended, its bed stacked with straw that is not quite straw. Tucked beneath it, I catch a wink of polished metal. Muskets, asleep in their nests. The tarp rises and falls minutely with the steady breathing of a sleeping guard on the far side. His hat has slipped forward. His mouth is open in a small O of democratic snoring. I consider waking him, decide against interfering with a man's most honest conversation with the world, and move on. I pass a door where a square of parchment is pinned with a nail. 3 lines written in a tidy hand. Butter one's 80 eggs, 6th the dozen. No credit. The last line has been underlined twice. A philosophy, really. Liberty will be financed in cash, or not at all. I can respect an economy that refuses to be seduced by rhetoric at 2 in the morning. The thunder auditions again. This time, the sound rolls longer, like a beer barrel being trundled down the dock. My scalp prickles. Weather, certainly. But it slurs itself just enough into the shape of a broadside being tested far out on the river. I imagine ships riding easy in the chop, sailors stowing lines, officers practicing their stern faces in polished brass, waiting. Always the waiting, rich with its own cruelty. Elfreth's alley narrows once more, forcing the houses to shake hands across the space. The lanterns here are tired, their edges fuzz with each shiver of breeze. I pause beside a doorway to listen. Above me, a table leg scrapes a floor. A woman's voice murmurs something steady, and a child answers in a whisper with the gravity of a clerk. Copywork, I think. Or prayers. Perhaps both. In this century, the two mingle without complaint. The patrol finds us, the way patrols do. Lantern first, a fat, wobbling moon bobbing up the alley's throat. Then shadow and metal. 2 watchmen at the front, halberds shouldered, their boots hitting the stones like a heartbeat that drank too much coffee. Behind them, a 3rd man in a red-brown coat of authority. And behind him, 2 more faces, young enough to believe uniforms make them tall. I step backward into a pocket of darkness by a rain barrel. The barrel smells like old ale and new weather. The patrol's lantern makes a golden puddle that slides over the cobbles and stops inches from my shoes. The captain slows. He hears what I hear, the quiver of someone else's breath. Across the alley, a thin man presses himself into the seam where brick meets shadow. He's too slow at becoming a wall. Your name, the captain says, voice level as a carpenter's tool. The thin man fumbles. John. The syllable lands crooked. John who? The thin man's eyes glance once at the captain's belt where a folded paper rides close to the hilt of a side sword. That glance is a signed confession in any language. The captain's mouth tightens by a teaspoon's width. One of the watchmen leans in, and his halberd's blade lifts the lantern's light in a cold line. John, the captain says, walk with us. The thin man doesn't. He bolts. It's a bad bolt. Hesitation at the first step. Fear fumbling handoff to flight. The watchmen are practiced. One pivots and brings the halberd butt down. The sound is ugly wood on bone, a punctual crack. The thin man folds to the stones with a grunt that belongs to a world without words. Blood nose paints the cobbles in quick, dark punctuation. No one opens their shutters. Patriotism has decent hearing and a poor sense of timing. The captain gestures. The men pull the thin man to his feet with the same professional care they'd use on a leaky cask. We're all going to be reasonable, the captain says, and for a moment I understand why that word will need new definitions tomorrow. They march him away, lantern rocking, boots scribbling authority in sparks across the stones. The alley inhales their absence and returns to its small domestic noises, like a pond, smoothing after a thrown rock. I let my shoulders drop the inch they rose and press my palm against the barrel to feel something that isn't a pulse. A door opens above me with the stealth of a thief. A face, just the suggestion of one, appears between curtain and frame. A hand extends, and for a second, a folded note hovers over the street like a hesitant bird, then withdraws again, reconsidering flight. The window closes with soft regret. On the far end of the lane, 3 boys ghost past with the liquid. Coordination of people who know how to avoid adults. One carries a small bundle wrapped in linen. It clinks softly. Another holds a loaf and breaks it into thirds with priestly seriousness. They vanish down a stair into a courtyard where a candle already waits. A tiny son with an ambitious job. I move on, deeper into the city's throat. The alley untwists itself into a slightly wider lane where the smell of damp wood sweetens into heat. Somewhere nearby, someone has added a log to a fire, and the smoke writes a letter to a distant sky. A bell, not the big one, not yet, taps twice as if testing the hour's locks. The last light on this street comes from a single upper window flame. In it, I can see an ink bottle, shoulder deep in shadow, and a pen laid across a page like a sleeping bridge. I imagine a hand returning, a line resumed. We hold these truths. A draft can smell like destiny or just ink. The room chooses. Tonight the room smells like both. Behind me, the river is a long, persuading whisper. Ahead, the city holds still like a coin on a thumb, heads or tails, ready to be flipped. I think of the sailor at the dock, smoke drawn thin in the wind. He sends boats. We'll send an answer, I think, written in a script even ships can read. For now, breathe with me. Slow in, slow out. Listen to the alley's small courage. Bread cooling, shutters deciding, boots receding, ink waiting. Philadelphia is half asleep, half afraid, and wholly awake to the cost of mourning. We'll keep walking toward bells that will not ring yet, taverns that argue like parliaments, a printer's shop where the night will learn the sound of revolution set to oppress his heartbeat. Stay close. The stones remember every foot that's hurried here. Tomorrow, they'll have a new memory. Tonight, they carry us gently to it. Chapter 2. The Bells and the Betrayers. Christ Church, City Tavern. Christ Church rises from the street like a sober thought. Brick and spire, a spine of faith, pushed up into a sky that still hasn't decided whether to rain or merely threaten it. The churchyard smells of candle wax and wet brick, a fragrance equal part sanctuary and basement. Iron railings bead with dew. The gate latch is cool as a reprimand. Overhead, the bells hang in their dark rafters like great sleeping hearts. They haven't been asked to speak yet tonight. They're listening. I slip through the side door and into a hush that recognizes me immediately as an intruder, and then, graciously, forgives it. Candle stubs gutter along the aisle, their little flames bowing in the drafts from the old wood. The pews keep their backs straight like good citizens. The floorboards murmur under my steps with the polite complaint of elders who would rather not be walked on after midnight. A man kneels alone in the front half light, a British soldier by the set of his shoulders and the red seam flashing when he shifts. He has removed his hat and set it carefully beside him, brim, toward the aisle like a knight laying down a shield before confession. His hands are clasped so tightly the knuckles look like new porcelain. He's whispering, but the words are in that raw place between language and breath. God hears fine from there, I'm told. I slide into a pew halfway back, keep my head low, and listen to the man weep. Not theatrically, No convulsions, no shuddering, but with the quiet endurance of someone who knows how to carry weight and has run out of places to put it. Duty kneels on one side of him. Guilt kneels on the other. The three of them make a small congregation. If the chaplain were here, he'd know what to say. I only know how to witness. A draft tugs the candle on the rail beside me, and a little droplet of wax runs down like a surrender flag. The soldier's whisper finds words. Forgive me, he says, and then, guide me, and then, more softly, please. That third one is the prayer that breaks me every time. No rank, no uniform, just a human syllable asking the night to be kinder than the day. Outside, the city breathes. A cartwheel on cobble, a horse stamping boredom from one hoof to the next, a late door clapping shut in the wind. The bells overhead give one brief, almost inaudible shiver, a bronze muscle flexed in sleep. They aren't ringing, not yet, but the iron in the air feels tuned to a note they know by heart. The soldier wipes his face with the back of his hand, the way children do when they forget they're allowed a handkerchief. He stands. He's younger than the posture of his coat implies. He turns not toward the door, but toward the altar, bows once, as if to apologize for occupying the wrong pew in the wrong colony at the wrong moment, then collects his hat and slips away, boots bending the hush but not breaking it. I stay a breath longer, letting the wax and wood smell right itself into the folds of my coat. Faith and fear do what they've always done. Share a bench, pass the collection plate, make room for one more. I leave with the quiet, taking care to close the door, as if the century were sleeping in the next room. Down the block, the night loses its piety. The City Tavern unbuttons itself into the street. Laughter hammered slightly out of shape by ale. The clink of tankards colliding like cheerful sabers. A fiddle wheedling through a reel, while a bodhran keeps time like a boot on a porch. The shutters leak lamplight in warm stripes across the mud, and steam slips from the kitchen like the ghost of tomorrow's hangover. The tavern sign swings above me, a modest creak for every gust. Inside, men are arguing with the affectionate aggression you reserve for family and politics. Out front, men are negotiating with the kind of firmness you reserve for livestock and sin. A pair of half-lit militiamen, shirts half-tucked, patriotism fully decanted, have a dockhand by the elbows and are steering him toward the door the way storm waves steer a dinghy, broadly and with intent. Service for liberty, friend, one declares, and he makes the word friend do a lot of heavy lifting. The dockhand's hat flies from his head and rolls away like a coin, losing interest in economy. It spins past my boots, wobbles, and succumbs to gravity's very clear opinion on recruitment strategies. Gentlemen, the dockhand says, dignified in a manner that suggests he's been through worse with better rum. My service belongs to my employer, my mother, and a cask behind that door. Your employer's a king who doesn't know your name. The first militiaman replies, wrestling righteousness into a key that might fit the lock. The second nods vigorously and almost falls over, which is about as American as it gets. Agreement with panache and minimal center of gravity. A man with a sash that thinks it's authority steps out of the tavern's shadow. He is sober enough to be dangerous, which isn't always the ratio you hope for in community leaders. Press him, he says, as if ordering bread. The word lands with the soft thud of inevitability wrapped in good intentions. Freedom recruits loudly and sobers slowly. I step aside because I am a historian with bones, and the hat rolls by again, as if it has changed its mind about stopping. The dockhand tries one more time. "I've a mother," he says, gesturing vaguely toward the river, where, to be fair, many mothers are not. "And a back," he adds, which is indisputable. The sash man relents a fraction, which is also American. Compromise enacted with visible reluctance. 2 months' bounty, the sash man says, and you sleep under a roof that isn't made of weather. He nods toward the tavern door, as if the Continental Army is just the bigger, angrier room at the back of the bar. The dockhand considers this economy, maps it against his current liquidity, low, and his current dignity, also low, and shrugs. "Fine," he says, like a man ordering a stew. He didn't want, because the day has already made too many decisions for him. The militiamen cheer. The crowd supplies a thin garnish of applause. Somewhere inside, a fiddler takes this as a cue to accelerate. Someone hands the dockhand a tankard. His first sip is half courage, half anesthesia, a contract signed in hops. I drift toward the door, not to intercede, but to borrow the heat. The tavern's interior is a democracy of elbows and opinions. A corner table hosts 3 men and a map. Another hosts a woman with flour on her sleeve who corrects a drunk's history with the speed and accuracy of a printing press. A boy threads through with a tray and a serenity that suggests he's seen worse brawls at family dinner. On the mantel, pewter tankards gleam in the light like a tidy army awaiting orders. A handbill curls on the hearthstone, edges toasted by enthusiasm. 2 arms, it says, and then something about tyranny in a font that has never known a delicate conversation. In the great American tradition, somebody has drawn a crude caricature in the margin. The caricature is recognizable. Tyranny seldom likes being sketched. A roar rises from the back room, the kind that happens when a toast goes well or a wager goes poorly. The sash man returns, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He catches my glance and tilts his chin in that way leaders have, as if to say, history will understand. I'm not in the business of reassuring men with sashes, so I offer a neutral nod, the Switzerland of gestures. Back outside, the air tastes like yeast and arguments. The press gang's energy dissipates into laughter and boasts, men punching each other in the arm to prove affection. The dockhand sits on the stoop for a minute, hands on his knees, the way you sit after accepting a future you didn't plan for. He retrieves his hat from where it is chosen, heroically, to stop at last. He dusts it off with a pride that survives on small rituals. Somewhere down 2nd Street, a patrol turns a corner, lantern swinging, boots on doctrine. Somewhere up Market, a woman pulls a curtain aside and rests her forehead on cold glass for a full count of 10. Between those somewheres, the city hums with a grand, tipsy certainty that the right thing can be done loudly and at scale. I look back at Christ Church, its spire black against a paler night, the bells invisible and intent. Inside those walls, a man asked forgiveness for the order he was sworn to defend. Outside this door, a man sold his next 2 months for a roof and a line on a muster roll. Faith and fear keep trading coats and pretending they don't recognize each other. The wind shifts and brings the river with it. Tar, rain, the far-off iron breath of ships keeping secrets. A cat pads across my path and sits with the seriousness of a magistrate. I bow to the magistrate. He declines to acknowledge my jurisdiction. "Onward, then," I whisper, because the night is a procession, and I am its quiet usher. There's a print shop where letters will shiver into words that shiver into law, and a green where whispers will collect into something louder than bells. But for now, remember this. Even patriotism smells faintly of rum, and sometimes the holiest tears are shed in a pew by a man in the wrong coat. Chapter 3. Ink and Iron, Carpenter's Hall, London. Coffee house. Carpenter's Hall crouches in the dark like a memory that refuses to leave the room. The brick glows dully under a skin of damp. The windows hold their breath. I press a palm to the door, and it yields a sigh. Old wood, remembering 1,000 arguments and letting one more slide through. Inside, the big room has the respectful gloom of a theater between matinees. Benches face an invisible center. Desks wait with quills upraised, each feather like a held note. The air smells of oak shavings, lamp oil, and the phantom of fresh ink. If ideas have an aftertaste, this is it. Wind rifles abandon papers on the front table, leafing through drafts as if hunting for the line that explains the century. Candle stumps stud the rails, their wax dripped into accidental topography. Mountains of resolve, valleys of second thoughts. The floor creaks under my weight, polite but opinionated. Every plank seems to have stored a speech and a rebuttal. I move slowly, careful not to startle the ghosts into re-election. Then the room isn't empty anymore. Not exactly. Voices bloom from the far chamber beyond the doorframe. Two men arguing in lowered tones that carry like a rumor over water. "Sign, and we die," says the first, a blade honed on fear. "Refuse, and we never lived," says the second, a blade honed on pride. Their syllables vibrate the air the way a struck bell hums, quiet, persistent, impossible to pretend away. The first paces. His heel clicks a nervous metronome. "We have children," he says, as if the British Crown might be sentimental about bedtime. The second answers with a chuckle that isn't humor. "Then let us earn the bedtime stories they'll tell of us." A draft pulls the door almost shut, then lets it drift open again, argument breathing. I step backward until my calves kiss the bench, the way you back away from an altar you don't belong at. I don't need to see faces. History will put names on them later, carve them onto plaques, mount them in textbooks like butterflies pinned through the thorax. For now, they are merely men wearing skin and indecision, trying to bargain with a future that never accepts coupons. "Take the middle," the first pleads. "Petition, delay, another committee." "The middle," the second replies, "is where good men go to become furniture." The wind slides through a cracked pane. The papers shiver. I abandon the room the way a thief abandons a fruitless drawer, careful to leave things looking undisturbed. Outside, the night resumes its more familiar soundtrack. A cart lumbering over stones, a horse snorting steam, into lamplight. Footsteps arranged in pairs, and arguments arranged in trios. I let the door close on the words I don't have the courage to finish listening to. Maritime gossip and political caffeine meet at the London coffee house, the way rivers meet at a whirlpool. The place hums. Even the shutters seem to vibrate with speculation. Inside, every table is a small nation with its own frontier policy. Every cup is an ally until it's empty. The air tastes of chicory, smoke, wet wool, and wagers placed with more enthusiasm than arithmetic. A boy thread needles between elbows with a tray and the poise of a diplomat who knows where to step and where to drown. I linger under the awning, because the awning is where secrets pause to catch their breath. Two men stand arm to arm, hats low, voices shaped to fit the ear and not the street. Shipments through the head of elk. Tomorrow night, one murmurs. Too late, says the other. The redcoats are sniffing like hounds on good grass. So we feed them the wrong scent. Something papery changes hands. Something metallic does the same. In the window's reflection, one man smiles without letting his mouth participate. Betrayal is rarely loud. It prefers the acoustic of breath. A shout cracks the square like a dropped plate. I turn. Torchlight has punctuated the night's margin with spectacle. A man is lashed to a post, shirt stripped, wrists bound. The whip hangs in the air for a heartbeat, long enough for the crowd to agree this is happening. Then falls with the sound of punctuation written by a zealot. The first stripe breaks skin. The second breaks something else. Perhaps quiet, perhaps mercy. Each lash draws a chorus. Traitor! From one side, liberty! From the other, as if the same syllables came in two flavors, blood orange and gunpowder. He might be a loyalist pamphleteer. He might be a smuggler who shorted the wrong patriot. He might be a man who looked like another man on the wrong evening. The square doesn't need the footnotes. It needs the lesson. I flinch on his third lash and dislike myself a little for keeping count. The whip cracks like a schoolmaster correcting grammar, and the back learns its alphabets in red. A woman near me covers her child's eyes with one hand and tightens the other around the child's shoulder, so both mercy and fear get their turn. A drunk bellows, "Give him 13," because someone always finds a way to be historically on brand. Even freedom likes an audience, I whisper, not proud of the observation, but responsible for it. The crowd swells, breath synced, moral certainty poured into a common cup and passed clockwise. A man with a bandaged ear shouts scripture at the top of his lungs. A man with perfect cuffs shouts prices under his breath. Revolution is many things. Tidy is not one of them. The stripes stop because the arm wielding them tires, not because the city has satisfied itself. The bound man sags. A physician? No one will pay steps forward with a rag and vinegar, which is the century's way of saying try not to die before the trial. The crowd exhales, some in pity, some in disappointment, and drifts toward the coffee house again, where opinions can be served hot and refilled indefinitely. I duck inside with them because warmth is not ideological. The room rings with spoons and rhetoric. On the far wall, a handbill advertises insurance against fire and loss and other inevitabilities, as if you could buy a policy against imperial collapse. A corner booth holds men bent over a ledger. Another holds a woman taking bets on whether the bells will ring at dawn, and on what, precisely, they will mean when they do. Her ink-stained fingers move faster than the quills that chase her math. A barista, powdered wig slightly askew, apron earning every stain, slides a saucer my way, as if I belong here. I don't, but the night indulges me. The coffee is bitter enough to qualify as a sermon. It says, choose. It says, pay. It says, no one gets to be clean. By the hearth, two merchants argue about ships as if ships were gods. Convoys or ruin, the first insists. Ruin, either way. The second replies with the serenity of a man hedged 6 ways to Sunday. Near the door, a printer thumbs a proof. His companion, a schoolmaster with chalk in his seams, reads aloud and edits from the jaw. Words leap like trout. Ideas hook and are released and hook again. Freedom here is born in lowercase and grows uppercase by committee. The flogged man is carried past the threshold on a door borrowed from its hinges. The coffee house turns as one organism and looks. No one claps. A few men avoid their reflections in the window glass. The boy with the tray steps smartly aside and sets down a cup on a saucer without spilling a drop. The night's most competent maneuver. Outside again, the square has reset to a lower simmer. A dog noses the puddle under the whipping post and thinks better of it. A cloud dulls the moon with a proprietary hand. Somewhere down the alley, a fiddler tunes to a note that won't quite hold, the bow sawing a question mark into the air. I lean against the coffeehouse wall, the brick cool through my coat, and let the chapter settle. Inside the hall, men argue with their futures. Inside the cafe, men gamble them. Between the two, the street writes the cost on human skin, line by awful line. The ideals clang against consequence like hammer to anvil, and the sparks fly into every window, setting small, private blazes in hearts that may or may not be brave when morning comes. Onward, I tell my boots, which are the only parts of me that never argue. There's a print shop where letters will march into formation, and a green where whispers will try on voices. For now, keep breathing with me. Slow in, slow out. The ink is drying, the iron is hot, and Philadelphia is learning how loud a quiet city can be the night before it names itself. Chapter 4, The Printer's Heartbeat. John Dunlap's Printing Press, 2nd Street Market. The alley to Dunlap's shop smells like rain-soaked paper and ambition. You can hear the press before you see it. A steady clack and sigh. The heartbeat of revolution wrapped in ink-stained linen. The rain drips from the eaves in rhythm with the press's cadence, and the night glows faintly red from a lantern burning behind the shutters. It's not the holy fire of liberty yet, just whale oil and stubbornness. I nudge the door, and it opens like it's been waiting. Inside, the air is heavy with the perfume of hot metal, damp wood, and ink that's tasted too many promises. John Dunlap himself hunches over the press, sleeves rolled, jaw clenched like a man wrestling with both history and bad typesetting. The press creaks, groans, exhales, the sound of words being born under duress. Beside him, a young apprentice wipes sweat with the back of his wrist and mutters, "God save us if we spelled it wrong." The printer doesn't look up. God can fix spelling. Parliament can't fix tyranny. The boy laughs once, a sound halfway between courage and hysteria. I stay near the door, watching the pages emerge one after another, crisp, wet, trembling with destiny. The top line catches the lantern light, when in the course of human events, I feel it. Not awe, exactly. More like the draft of a storm finding its direction. In the corner, barrels wait in the half-dark, marked molasses. A cart rumbles up the alley, the wheels slurring in mud. 2 men push through the doorway, their coats dripping. "Delivery," one says. Dunlap doesn't look up. He nods toward the back. The barrels roll in, thudding hollow against the wall, except they aren't hollow. When one tips slightly, it rings like something metallic inside. A corner of the canvas slips, revealing the dull, gray glint of musket barrels. "For the cause," whispers the taller man. Dunlap's apprentice swallows hard. I can't tell if it's fear or pride. Maybe both. Dunlap finally pauses, presses his thumb into an ink pad, and stamps the page like a blessing. "Keep your barrels sealed and your mouths tighter," he says. "The press makes noise enough for all of us." The smugglers vanish back into the rain, leaving behind the smell of gunpowder pretending to be sugar. For a moment, the room feels split down the middle, half workshop, half armory, ink and iron, one shaping the mind, the other the hand, both about to be equally dangerous. I step closer to the press. The apprentice feeds another sheet, his fingers trembling. Each word comes out backwards in metal, then forwards in meaning. The miracle of the printed lie we call truth. The clack of the press fills the room, syncopated by rain tapping the roof like a drummer warming up for rebellion. Dawn deadline? I ask. Dunlap glances up, eyes dark with exhaustion and satisfaction. Before the coffeehouses wake, he says. Before anyone has time to doubt it. He cranks again, and the page slides out like a newborn screaming in Latin. Words are weapons, I murmur. He grins faintly. Then God help the illiterate. Outside, the alley glistens with puddles that swallow lantern light. A cart squeals past, the driver humming something that might be a hymn or just the tune of survival. I head toward 2nd Street Market, where the night shifts from intellect to appetite. The market is a skeleton now. Stalls, half covered in burlap, produce long gone, fishmongers vanished into their dreams. The rain has turned the cobbles into mirrors. Lanterns hang on crooked poles, their glass fogged to a soft, uncertain glow. The air smells of wet straw and yesterday's bread. The aroma of a city trying to pretend hunger is patriotic. A lone vendor dozes on a stool under an awning, hat tipped low, a crust of bread in his lap like a fragile trophy. His cart holds a handful of loaves and one heroic onion. A soldier approaches, uniform soaked to the knees, coat hanging heavy as gilt. His hair clings to his temples. His hands fumble at his chest until he finds something bright, a silver button. He pries it loose with a wince, flips it once in his palm, and holds it out. For a loaf, he says. The vendor looks at the button, then at the soldier, then at the sky, which offers no opinion. Finally, he nods. One loaf changes hands. The vendor pockets the button with a reverence normally reserved for sacraments. No words are exchanged. Commerce, like grief, doesn't need dialogue. The soldier tears off a hunk of bread, tucks the rest under his arm, and walks away chewing like a man committing to memory what survival tastes like. I follow him with my eyes until he dissolves into the fog. Liberty, I murmur, like bread, goes stale fast if not shared. From the shadows, 2 boys dart out and lift a smaller loaf from the cart. The vendor sees it, hesitates, and pretends not to. Compassion, it turns out, is the first profitable sin of revolution. Rain picks up its tempo, drumming the awnings, turning gutters into narrow streams that carry away the city's crumbs and secrets. Down the street, a dog noses through refuse, finds nothing of value, and sneezes at the smell of courage gone moldy. I wander between the stalls, the soft slap of my boots mixing with the low rhythm of the downpour. A torn poster on the wall flaps against the brick. Long live the king, scratched through, replaced with a crude we shall see. The ink runs, blending both sentiments into one wet confession. Farther down, a man in rags mutters sermons to himself. No man owns the air, he tells the rain. No man owns the light. His voice is ragged but firm, the kind of faith you can't tax. He catches my eye and grins. They'll hang me for this mouth, he says. Then speak louder, I reply. He cackles like a man already free. The rain finally softens, and the smell of yeast from some unseen bakery wafts through the air. Sweet, warm, and slightly cruel. Dunlap's press will be finishing soon. The first copies of Something Immortal will be drying on racks, their edges curling as ink settles into permanence. Out here, Men will wake to find their world rewritten by people with cleaner hands and dirtier consciences. I pause under the eave of a shuttered shop and look back toward the direction of Dunlap's alley. Every press stroke, every whispered "for the cause," every traded button, every stolen loaf, they're all cogs in the same impossible machine. Words feed the fire. Hunger fuels belief. And somewhere between ink and iron, a nation is starting to breathe. I exhale and pull my coat tighter. They'll call it freedom, I say to the rain. But for now, it's just weather and waiting. A bell tolls distantly from the north. Not quite dawn. Not quite hope. Just time reminding the city it's still moving. I follow the sound. My boots splash in puddles that shimmer with reflected lantern light. Each one a tiny republic, doomed to vanish by morning. Philadelphia hums beneath the storm, its heart pounding in ink, in hunger, in quiet defiance. And I keep walking, because that's what you do when the world is being printed one page and one wound at a time. Chapter 5. Sparks and Shadows. Benjamin Franklin's Courtyard, Walnut Street Jail. The rain hasn't quit. It's only gotten more philosophical about falling. Fat drops plunk from rooftops and race each other down window panes. The winners rewarded with the honor of hitting the cobblestones first. The storm has thickened into something biblical. And naturally, this is when Benjamin Franklin decides to play catch with heaven. His courtyard sits behind the print shop like an unfinished thought. Mud puddles reflecting lamplight. Brass instruments lying around, as if the Enlightenment had wandered off, mid-sentence. A metal rod juts into the sky, defiant, and, if you ask the lightning, tempting. Franklin stands beneath it in his shirt sleeves, muttering to himself, half philosopher, half madman, all hubris. "Welcome to the lab," I whisper to no one in particular. Tonight's experiment. How close one can get to divine retribution without insurance. He's fussing with the rod, tightening a clasp, checking the angle. Sparks leap faintly from the wet surface when his knuckles brush the metal. The air tastes like ozone and curiosity. Somewhere behind me, a stray cat yowls, offended by the weather or the human tendency to taunt it. Franklin steps back and squints up into the churning dark. The clouds are stitched with pale veins of lightning, each one threatening to finish his sentence for him. "Freedom," he mutters, tugging on a wire, "is just controlled lightning." I grin in spite of myself. "And most of us still get shocked," I say softly, though he doesn't hear me, too busy coaxing the sky into conversation. A flash answers him. The courtyard blazes white for a heartbeat, every raindrop suspended midair, the rod glowing like a sword held up to God's disapproval. Franklin laughs, not madly, but joyfully, as if he's just heard the universe whisper a secret and decided it was worth the hearing. He wipes water from his face, satisfied. "Ah," he says to the storm, "you'll behave yet." I consider applauding, but a gentleman should never interrupt someone arguing successfully with the heavens. The thunder rolls overhead, moving east, and with it, the echo of something less noble. Chains clattering faintly from Walnut Street. The jail squats only a few blocks away, all black stone and bad intentions. Even from here, I can feel its weight, the way it drags at the air like an anchor. Franklin courts lightning. The jail keeps it bottled. As I walk toward it, the storm decides to test the limits of my patience. Sheets of rain turn the street into a river of reflected lanterns, gold smeared with gray. Each flash of lightning catches the jail's iron bars, making them gleam like the ribs of a sleeping beast. The building doesn't just hold prisoners, it digests them slowly. A shout slices through the downpour. I duck into an alley just as soldiers spill into the street, boots hammering the cobbles. They're dragging a man by his arms. A well-dressed gentleman, maybe a merchant, maybe a politician with the wrong opinions. His wig has come half undone. The rain has matted it to his head in a sad imitation of dignity. Behind him, a woman leans out of a doorway, her voice breaking on his name. Thomas! She screams at once, pure and sharp, before a soldier slams the door shut with his musket butt. The sound echoes, swallowed by thunder. I flinch despite myself. Rain runs down my collar like the slow fingers of a guilty conscience. They haul the man toward the jail, his heels scraping, coat dragging. He's shouting something. I am loyal, or I am innocent, which under the current regime is the same as saying, I am doomed. The soldiers don't answer. One of them trips on a rut and curses the cobbles. The irony is thick enough to bottle. At the gate, a jailer waits under a hooded lantern, keys jangling like impatient thoughts. He's built like a sermon, broad, grim, and convinced of his own necessity. Name? He asks, though he already knows. They all already know. This isn't paperwork, it's punctuation. The prisoner doesn't answer, too busy gasping for air. The jailer nods to the soldiers. He'll talk by dawn. The phrase lands like a stone in water, rippling through the rain. I've heard its siblings in other centuries, other languages, confess, cooperate, comply, always ending the same way. Someone talking just long enough to regret it. They vanish into the jail's maw, the door closing with a thud that feels like the period at the end of a sentence humanity keeps rewriting. For a moment, the street is empty except for me and the rain's relentless monologue. I cross the road and stand beneath a gutter, watching the water pour like liquid silver. The lantern on the wall flickers, its flame fighting the wind with the same optimism that built this country. Somewhere above, Franklin's rod still hums faintly, pulling electricity from the clouds. Here, the same energy hums in a different key, coils of fear wound tight, waiting for a spark. A voice behind me breaks the rhythm. You there? A guard calls, his musket angled lazily, but not without intent. What's your business? I raise both hands, the universal gesture of, I'm too wet to be dangerous. Just walking, I say, trying not to drown. He squints, the lamplight painting his face in chiaroscuro, half man, half suspicion. Curfew's on. Best get inside, stranger. I nod. I'll take that under advisement. He grunts and turns back, toward the jail, muttering something about fools and weather. As I retreat, I catch the faint glow of a candle through one of the high, narrow windows. It trembles, then vanishes. Maybe the prisoner. Maybe a guard reading his orders. Maybe just the rain playing tricks. But for a heartbeat, it looks like a single spark holding the dark at bay. Lightning forks across the sky again, sharp and theatrical, and for an instant, the whole street flashes into honesty. Mud, chains, wet uniforms, freedom's favorite tools. Franklin's spire in the distance mirrors the light, twin lances of brilliance stabbing the same black cloud. One born of curiosity, one of cruelty, both inevitable. I laugh quietly, because sometimes irony is the only warm thing left in the night. Enlightenment meets repression, I say to the storm. It's a hell of a duet. The thunder answers with enthusiasm. I turn away from the jail and walk back through the flooded street. Boots squelching, coat dripping, The lightning flares one last time over the rooftops, and in its glow, I imagine Franklin at his workbench again, dry now, triumphant, coaxing sparks into jars, capturing the wildest force on earth and naming it science. He'll bottle it, explain it, own it, just like they'll try to do with liberty. The rain eases as I reach the corner. Somewhere a bell tolls, slow and unsure, like it's counting seconds instead of hours. Behind me, the jail fades into shadow, and Franklin's courtyard flickers with ghost light. The storm has passed, but the air still hums with charge, the kind that waits for hands brave or foolish enough to touch it. Freedom, I whisper, watching the last flash ripple across the clouds, is just controlled lightning. And somewhere deep inside the jail, a man begins to talk. Chapter 6, The Birth of Silence. State House Yard, Independence Hall. Rain taps the iron like a clock that can't make up its mind. The State House Yard crouches behind its fence. Trees black and slick, their leaves whispering conspiracies to the night. Torches hiss along the perimeter, each flame wearing a halo of steam. Philadelphia leans, quietly, greedily, toward a single building lit like an ember that refuses to die. I move along the fence, palm skimming cold iron. The ground is a dark mirror. Mud, rain, stray feathers from some doomed pillow. Voices carry oddly in this weather, thin and sharp, as if the storm has sanded the edges off everyone's restraint. Beyond the yard wall, the city mutters to itself. Carts, hooves, shutters, the occasional laugh that sounds like someone testing whether joy is still legal. Then I hear it, the chant. Not sung, not shouted, hammered. Liberty, liberty. It comes from the alley by the print shop, the syllables marching drunk and righteous. The kind of rhythm that makes hands forget their hands and remember they can be fists. I slide toward the noise, and the scene arrives all at once. A swell of men in work coats, caps askew, faces rain-slick and hard. A small knot of militia, half trying to keep order, half enjoying the weather. And in the center, a man pinned against a barrel, eyes blown wide. He's well dressed in the way wealth tries not to brag. Good wool, fine buttons, a silvered buckle now tilting like a broken smile. His wig hangs askew, rain flattening it to his scalp. He is breathing too fast for the damp night to hold. Loyalist, someone spits. The word lands like a brand. The barrel lid is pried up. Steam unfurls, thick, sweet, nauseating, tar gone glossy with heat. It smells like a shipyard's fever dream. Pitch, smoke, and a buried hint of pine that only makes the rest worse. The mob surges, then parts for a man with an iron ladle the size of a small tragedy. He dips it, the tar licking the metal, and for a blink, the whole alley reflects the torchlight as if admiring itself. Please, the gentleman says to anyone, to everyone, to me. His voice climbs a ladder and misses the last rung. He doesn't get to finish. The first splash hits his chest. He screams. It's not a sound you measure. It's a tearing, cloth, soul, something you hope belongs to a past century and not your species. The tar crawls down, thick and hot, clasping skin the way molten glass might hold a breath. His hands jerk, rope biting his wrists. Another ladle. Onto his arms, his neck. He tries to twist away and makes it worse, because pain is a bad negotiator. The mob flinches and leans in the same motion, fascinated by its own punishment. Hold him, someone says, and they do. Men who have held plows and nets and grudges. Feathers arrive in a sack, pale and obscene in the firelight. One boy, too eager, too young, rips it open and throws them by the fistful. They stick everywhere, landing on tar with a wet kiss, drifting in rain like burnt snow. The man shakes his head, and a cluster of feathers clings to his cheek. For a heartbeat, he looks like a grotesque angel that heaven refused delivery on. "Sign!" a voice jeers. "Put your name to the king and see where it gets you." Laughter answers, thin and cruel, a flock of crows disguised as men. I feel myself take a step back and a step forward in the same instant, cowardice and sympathy arm wrestling in my chest. The tar hisses, finding new geography to conquer. The smell is a black wall. He turns and sees me, really sees me, through rain and pain and feathered indignity. His eyes lock onto mine like a drowning man finding a rung. "Sir," he gasps, hoarse, What are we becoming?" It is not the first time I've been asked that by history, and it will not be the last. The mob hears the plea and pivots. Faces swing toward me, torches painting them saintly and monstrous by turns. There's a question in their stare. "Are you with us, stranger? Do you cheer? Do you flinch?" I don't move. The rain runs off my hat and into my collar. I let the silence hang between us like a verdict nobody wants to read. The man keeps pleading with his eyes, and I have nothing to give except witness. It is not much, and tonight it is everything I'm willing to spend. Someone ties a sign around his neck, rough plank, hastily inked. The letters wobble, but they don't stutter. Tory on one line, and beneath it, enemy to liberty. The sign knocks against his tarred chest with a sickening tack-tack. A rope goes over his shoulders. The knot is the kind you use for cargo you intend to keep. "To the river," the iron ladle man says. It is not a sentence. It is a commute. They drag him toward the Delaware, chanting again, "Liberty," like a prayer that has forgotten what it prays for. Feathers trail in their wake, lodging in puddles, sticking to cobbles, drifting to the curb, where a rat knows them warily and decides even hunger has manners. I follow far enough to feel the river's breath, iron and tide, and no farther. The water takes what the mob gives it, as water always does. A splash, a sobbing hiss, a voice cracked down to splinters. "Freedom smells a lot like smoke," I say to the rain. It doesn't disagree. I turn back toward the yard, toward the building that glows like a throatful of words about to be spoken. Independence Hall is lit from within by 100 small suns. Candles throbbing behind window panes, shadows moving like careful ghosts. The gate admits me, because tonight even iron wants a front row seat. The brick is cold when I lay my hand on it, cool as a fever breaking. Inside, silhouettes cross and recross. A bent back, a hat lifted, a hand steadying a page. The storm muffles everything, but when the thunder steps away for breath, I hear it, the scratch of a quill. It is a tiny, defiant noise, insect small and world devouring. I close my eyes and can almost hear the words gather. We hold these truths, ideas clearing their throats, vowels sharpening, consonants buttoning their coats. Men pass documents like tinder, each signature a spark they think they can control. Outside, tar still smokes. Inside, ink dries into doctrine. Between the two, a nation assembles itself out of paradox and promise. A draft sneaks under the door and chills my knees. It smells of beeswax, wet wool, and paper that will outlive every hand that touches it. A figure pauses at the window. The outline of a man who knows history will carve his face on mountains and money. He sets his palm to the glass, then draws it back and wipes the fog from his cuff. The quill resumes, so does the future. The world just changed. I whisper to the bricks, to the rain, to the poor drowned feathers along the curb, and it didn't even wake the city. The yard has gone strangely gentle. Torches gutter down to patient coals. The trees, finished with gossip, stand like ushers at a wedding. In the distance, the river hushes itself, or maybe I've learned to hear around it. The chant fades. The sign, I know, will warp and blur in the rain until enemy looks like nearby, and someone will take it as a sign too, because we're very good at reading the things we most fear. Behind the glass, a chair scrapes, a murmur, a hand lifts a candle. The light blooms and softens, turns every shadow into possibility. Stillness replaces noise. Candlelight replaces fear. Somewhere a bell in its cupola wakes without ringing, as if it knows its big moment's coming and wants to stretch first. I step back from the wall. Rain runs off the eaves and beads, silver rosaries for a secular prayer. The yard exhales. The city rolls in its sleep and pulls the blankets tighter. And I, soft-footed, soft-voiced trespasser, take one last look at the window, where the quill keeps scratching and the country keeps beginning. Sleep well, sleepyheads. The circle stays lit, even when the footsteps fade.